Good morning. Please silence all your electronic devices for the duration of this meeting, please. Those of you online, we ask that you mute yourselves and to utilize the hand feature when you would like to speak. Welcome to the January 13th Charter Review Ad Hoc Committee meeting. My name is Jan McLean, and I am HART Board Counsel. I will start the meeting until a committee chair is elected. The meeting format is hybrid. Quorum is physically present at the HART Administrative Office, 1201 East 7th Avenue, Florida Conference Room, and the rest of the board members are participating via communication media technology. Please look at the screens on your devices. An image of the flag is displayed, and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, we'll accept public comment. I believe no one has signed up to speak.
That is correct.
Okay, so moving on. That concludes the public input section of the meeting. We now have the election of committee officers. The next item is the officer elections, which I will chair. The process will be that I will ask for nominations from the floor, which do not require a second. Once nominations are closed, I will ask the committee members to vote on the nominations in order received to identify one committee member with a majority of votes. The last step will be to confirm the committee officer's election with a motion by the board. Do we have any questions on the process? Okay, first officer position is committee chair of the Charter Review Ad Hoc Committee. The previous chair in 2024 was committee member Schisler. Do I have any nominations from the floor?
Yes, ma'am.
I nominate Joe Sisler.
Okay, we have one nominate.
Second? Oh, you don't need a second, never
Okay,
mind.
I'll accept.
Okay. So could I have a motion to accept the committee chair? 3.
Also moved.
Thank you. Do we need to do a roll call of the 3? Okay. So Mr. Schisler is committee chair for 2025. The next officer position is for committee vice chair of the Charter Review Ad Hoc Committee. The previous vice chair from 23 was committee member Hartfield. Do I have nominations from the floor for the 25 committee vice chair of the Charter Review Ad Hoc Committee?
Nominate
Position.
John King.
Mr. King, would you accept the nomination?
I have a quick question. Is Mr. Hartfield no longer interested in continuing in that capacity, or?
That's correct.
Then I accept.
Okay. Any other nominations for vice chair? Could I have a motion then to elect committee member King as vice chair of the Charter Review Ad Hoc Committee?
Move to elect John King as vice chair to the Charter Review Ad Hoc Committee.
Second.
Thank you. Congratulations to the new officers. I'll now turn the meeting over to Chair Schisler.
Thank you, Ms. McLean. Looks like, I don't have a script here, but that's okay. The first order of business then would be the approval of the minutes. Oh, you don't
Yes,
have to-
that's true.
So moved.
From the October 21st, 2024 Charter Review Ad Hoc Committee, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second? David?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion second. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Aye.
No nays. Motion passes. Thank you. Next on the agenda is a discussion item. Ms. Jan McLean, Hart Board Counsel, I will defer to you to lead the discussions of the committee working draft.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to confirm, I know Mr. King and Mr. Schisler have their board packet, which has the updated working committee draft. It's dated November 5th of '24. It's a newer version. Mr. Mechanic, do you have your working draft from your packet that you could follow along?
I do not, but that's okay. I'll follow.
Okay. It's in the packet if you have a chance to open it up. Because what I wanted to do,
Okay.
what the committee had asked me to do was update the version of the working draft in a strike-through and underline manner, which you have in front of you. There's very little changes. There was some cleanup done from our last meeting in November. And what we could do, I would suggest, would be to just move through the draft and let me explain what the changes are that you see in front of you, if that would be all right with the
Please
members?
proceed.
I have a question.
Yes, sir?
Is this the final opportunity to amend this draft before it goes before the board? Or is there another?
No.
It's up to the committee, if,
Let's see
however long,
how the
Okay.
discussions go.
yes. So we don't have a schedule as far as when the committee has to finalize, just whenever you have a draft to finalize that you would recommend that the board to discuss. Okay. So some of the more obvious ones, you've got, you have an underline on the second whereas, which just gives you some historical perspective on what was done previously. That's on page 1. There's no changes on page 2. The lines that you'll see along the side are formatting changes, if you're wondering what they are, because they usually indicate that there has been some changes. Also on page 3, no changes on that. On page 4, Article 4, under the article entitled Board of Directors. The committee had discussions, and previous to that, I actually don't recall if there was any discussion at the board level before the ad hoc committee was developed on the size of the board. In the statute and the current charter, you have 150,000 persons as the basis for the determination of adding a director. Just for the purposes of discussion, and this was part of the conversation in November, if I could draw your attention to page, I apologize, larger than I thought. Here we go. Page 14, if you would have that beside you in addition to page 4. So Mr. Smith and I had discussed with the committee various levels of population to use for revising the composition of the board. Like I said, at this point, we have 150 persons, and we have a 15-member board. There was some consideration as to whether we wanted to condense the board down, and going forward, we would have to address the population basis because that's what the statute requires. So on page 14, you have the different levels of population and what that would result in as far as a representation of the board. For instance, right now, we have the 150. That means that there's 4 representatives from the city of Tampa, 1 from Temple Terrace, 8 from the county, and then 2 from the state, the governor. So that 2 from the governor will always remain. And then you have the different levels which would result in the reduction of members on the board. The contemplation of how this would be implemented is that in the organizational meetings of the members on the annual basis, as a position would open up through attrition, it would not be replaced, assuming that that's what the will of the committee and the board approve. But that's what you have in front of you to address going from 15 down to 10. In your paragraph, we used 11 as the example. So your board would result in 11 members based on 250,000 population.
How would the reduction be achieved?
So at the organizational meetings of each member, as the term limits of the representative is up, or if somebody decides to withdraw, if we have approved the reduction of the board, then that position might not be appointed, depending on who the member is. I mean,
So we would just basically attrition down to that level.
correct.
over time. So we would just attrition down to that level over time.
Correct. It should be rather quickly because they have the organizational meetings on an annual basis.
Yeah, okay. We're not under any obligation to reduce the size of the board, are we?
No, it was just an item that was brought up at during conversation and discussion as to the management of a board of this size at this point, at 15, and as population continues to grow, then your board would continue to expand as well. It was also noted in the FDOT report as to the size of the board.
I kind of took that as a suggestion rather than requirement. Yeah,
Yes,
Okay.
there was no requirement by the DOT report. It was just a mention.
yeah,
So this is, and we addressed it based on that, so that the committee and then eventually the board, if the committee so recommended that the board discuss it, have something in front of you as a target to discuss. And what we wanted to do, Mr. Smith and I, was to create that basis so that the committee could see what the result of increasing the population, which would reduce the membership of the board.
I have a quick question though. Do you
Yes,
want to
sir.
go through this entire presentation and then come back and address these items individually? Or do you want to address them as we go through?
Since there's really only the four of us here,
Yeah.
I'm glad to do it either way, but it seems,
I was just wondering if you have a preference.
I don't.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, do you have a preference as to how we handle it? Okay, so at this point, really, there's no decisions necessarily to be made unless the committee members would like to discuss this, and if you are formulating a recommendation for the board, or if you would like something to change in the example. Like I said, in the example, we used reducing the board down to 11.
Well, considering we just added a 15th member, I'm a little reluctant to start reducing it.
Okay, so maybe we leave that as an example, because the whole concept could be, or you're saying the whole concept not to be moved forward?
Well, having just gotten on this board, my reaction would be to leave it at 150,000. As opposed to 250,000.
Okay,
So that basically the board composition would remain as it is.
okay. Mr. Chair, Mr. McKennick, did I hear you? Did you have a question?
I have nothing. I didn't say anything.
Oh, sorry.
I don't have any strong feelings on it, other than the fact that at 150,000, we could get we could get much larger and become very unwieldy after a while, which is my concern. At 250,000 growth, it kind of puts a damper on it. And to me, there's two issues here. The trigger and then the maximum size of the board. Okay? You get 15, at the rate of growth, we could add another one every 3 or 4 years. And the problem is, we haven't addressed this since 1980.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
And back then, the growth rate wasn't as dynamic as it is
Okay.
now. So the 250 would put a bit of a damper on how quickly it can grow. But, so there's the trigger, and then there's the actual size. Or there's 3 issues in this one, too. Then the actual size of the board. Eventually, you become a point where you need a dozen people just to get a quorum.
Well, what if we were to cap the total membership at 15 or 13, some agreed number, not to exceed?
Just make sure the long division works for
Yeah.
the relative representation by the members, the 3 members of the authority.
Because if I may, because the statute requires the population basis, I mean,
I understand the argument that we want to keep the board to a manageable size just for the sake of conducting business. But, I mean, we, under the existing formula, we just added a 15th member.
Right.
Okay. Maybe the compromise would be to limit the board to 13 as opposed to 11. I think the concept of having an odd number of board members works from the standpoint of voting, whether it's 11, 13, 15, or what have you.
I would like to,
Oh,
if I may,
Jan, were you saying, Jan, were you about to say, though, that the statute doesn't allow that to put, for us to put a cap?
I apologize. Had this cough for about 2 months. Yes, that's exactly where I was going, Mr. Mechanic. Given the basis of the statute that says that we have to have a population that would,
It would be an internal conflict.
yes.
Okay, I get it.
So then why are we limiting it to 11? How can we limit it to 11 then?
Well, we wouldn't actually be able to limit it to 11, but you would increase your population so that your growth would be slower.
Right.
I mean,
Okay, well, if I'm looking,
You,
We would go down to 11, but it would creep back up over time.
potentially, yes.
Yeah, as the population increases.
well, it says here, in an effort to maintain the total number of directors at 11. Okay, I'm sorry, the beginning of the blue line, it says, the number of directors shall not exceed 11, which is based upon the current population data. And then later it goes in to say that not to go higher than 11.
Well, that's based on your population basis moving from 150 to 250. But I don't believe that we can have an actual number cap. You would have to, I mean, we could look at maybe the Bureau, it's Bieber, the Bureau of Economic, thank you. They do population analysis and projections, and you could at least have that as a basis of looking forward as what your population proposal might be, so that you could say, in the next 15 years, you wouldn't anticipate that the number of board members would exceed 11 based on that population projection. So you would have used the 250 if 11 was what you were proposing, or 10 or 12, whatever.
I would expect those calculations would be somewhat conservative. In other words, they would be maybe not quite as robust as what the actuality might be.
Well, it's true, and unanticipated events.
So in a way, this is kind of like a reset button, allowing us to reset the size of the committee based on formula, and then allowing it to grow again over time. As
Yes.
the population would increase.
Yes. And like we said at the outset, this is for purposes of discussion. This is the first time we've actually had more than just me explaining what is being presented, so you haven't had an opportunity to think through what the words on the paper are and what the consequences of that might be.
Let me clarify. You just said, I think, that statute restricts us from putting a cap on it. Am I paraphrasing that wrong?
Well, the statute requires that the membership of the board be based on population.
Okay.
So, my understanding, my opinion is that we can't put a cap on it because you have to have the basis of population.
So then how can we have the line in here, the number of directors shall not exceed 11 total, which is based upon the current population available?
Because then you would change your population basis.
Can we remove the word exceed or shall not exceed?
Okay, I wish I'd put this, numbers on this formatting.
I think it's a verbiage question.
Yes, we could do that. And it would require the population then to be revised in order to substantiate the 11. So
Based
you-
on the based on the revised formula.
Yes, something along those lines.
But, 11 would be flexible in terms of 11, 12, 13, what have you.
I'd have to look at the wording of what we're going to put in the charter, because right now, it's not automatic that we'd go back in and change the population basis. You'd have to make an amendment to the charter to indicate that, I believe. I want to clean.
Okay, right now it's at 150. So in order to reduce the size, you'd have to change that number.
Right.
Correct. And the 250 gets you to the 11.
And 13 would fall somewhere around 200?
13 is 175. That's what your formulas are on page 14.
Yeah, it doesn't go up to 13 though.
Sorry?
Mine cuts off at 11 and 12 has been redlined and there's nothing after 12.
You mean in pages?
No, there's number of members on page 16. 14 goes over 14, 15, and 16.
Oh, I see, for the appendix, yes. We'd
Right.
have to revise the appendix.
Yeah.
I was looking at the chart that David and I did on page 14.
13 would be 175?
13 members.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So just for direction for the staff, for me, is this something that the committee members even want to consider proposing as far as the revision of the membership?
Unfortunately, just my opinion, unfortunately, if we were just drafting this to begin with, we'd look at this from a logistical basis and manageability, coverage, make sure that it does what it's intended to do. Unfortunately, we have the political aspect of it also, and whether it's going to be tenable and how unsavory any of these items are going to be. Maybe a compromise would be to maintain the current level, but to shift the trigger from the 150 to the 250. And that way, nobody has to go home, no member gets to feel slighted, and everybody still gets their piece of the pie. So maybe that works, as well as, and I know I was kind of sort of in favor of this, of limiting the number of elected officials as a director, but I don't, that has to be couched and presented in such a way that it becomes less of a political issue or a politician issue, more of a being able to contribute to the overall running and management of the system itself, where there's experience in transportation or, whatever, which is one of the things that I believe that the study said that we need to work towards, people who are more focused in the transit industry and what we're trying to accomplish with the organization overall, as opposed to just filling a resume somewhere. So, and
Well,
it's probably not a popular way of saying it, but it is what it, in my mind, it is what it is.
I think there's a reasonable case for wanting to optimize the board membership at a certain point, whether it's 11, 12, 13, what have you. From an efficiency point of view, fewer people would have a number, fewer opinions to take into account and fewer agendas to have to satisfy. But looking at the board that I've seen for the past year, and knowing that that's not necessarily always been the case or would be the case in the future, the composition of the board that I see is pretty amenable to supporting the needs and interests of HART. So, and I don't think anybody would necessarily have to get fired over it. It's just that their position would be attritioned off as they came up for renewal or as their term expires. In other words, we wouldn't automatically just go down to 11 or 13 or whatever that number would be on a given date, but as soon as someone's position was vacated, assuming they're not one of the elected officials that's mandated by statute, then that position would be it would just go away.
Well, I disagree with that. It would take time for that to accomplish.
Yeah.
And that's fine. I'm not
Yeah.
trying to, I don't want to force anybody out at all.
Unless I'm mistaken, am I mistaken about that? Or is
No,
it-
that's the way it was.
Okay, that's,
The
Well,
public,
it would affect on the annual review, it would all change. So, right?
define annual.
It wouldn't, whenever that local government's annual review would be when the change would take place.
Correct.
Yes.
That's what was proposed, yes. At the organizational meetings of the members where the,
So the attrition would occur during that time period, so it would take a year or whatever for that to occur.
correct,
But the non-annually elected people would be through attrition in their 3-year terms.
yes. That's what was,
That's going to be hard to explain. It's
yes.
going to be hard to explain.
well, I don't know, I got it.
I don't think it's confusing.
David, what's your thoughts on the number of elected officials as a director?
Well, I like 11. I mean, I would, if it was just up to me, I would make the change to the 250,000 population. I mean, considering the fact we don't have a choice, Jan is saying we have to base it on population. So the only way we can effectuate a change is to do it by population. So let's do it. I don't see, unless if there are people who say leave the board at 15, that's fine. That's an opinion. But I'm just saying, if you agree to reduce the board, the only way to do that is to adjust the population.
Okay, so if we change it to 250, the automatic calculation then reduces the number of board members automatically. We don't have to do anything artificially, it just happens on its own.
Correct, right.
Okay.
Or if you chose a figure in between.
And then over years, I mean, it may be in 10 years, the board will grow again, but somebody could deal with it at that time,
That's fair. Do we have too much verbiage in the blue section to accomplish that? Or do we need that to clarify it? Because it says here we're going to 11, then we're taking from 15 down to 11, but we can't really put a limit on it, blah, blah, blah. So
So the proposal would just be to change from the 150 to the 250?
250, and then maybe a comment in there, the size of the board would be such going forward.
Yep. I have to admit, most of this was my suggested clarification so that the current members could understand what the representation would be as far as Tampa versus Temple Terrace versus county.
But that'd be required, but in my mind, David's explanation just clarified that very succinctly and just flipped the light switch for me anyway.
Well, I would be amenable to 175. which would be in between the two. It would still give you an odd number of board members, but it would not necessarily alter the composition of the board that much.
Well, and what the committee could do is, because you're an ad hoc committee, to develop the recommendations to the board, you wouldn't have to necessarily pick one. You could say that the committee has suggested that you look at these two, that the issue is the management of the size of the board.
We'll have the opportunity, I'm assuming, during the presentation of this to the full board, to say, okay, if we stay at 150, we're here. We do 175, we're here. We do 50, we're here. Now, where does our manageability, where do our efficiencies come into play? What is the best level for us, okay? And then we'll put this together as at an iterative
Correct.
step. Keeping in mind that 3 people have to be from here, 1 from Temple Terrace, 3 from the city, 3 from the county, and then it builds up beyond that, 2 from the governor, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
Okay, that'll be part of the roadshow. Because not just the board, then we have to explain that to the city, Temple Terrace, City of Tampa, and the BOCC. Okay. The last sentence in there, in that group, was each member shall appoint no more than X number of elected officials, public officials as director. David, what's your thoughts on that?
I don't have an opinion.
Again, that was just a mention of, at previous meetings from our committee members
Yeah.
that, okay. Because
I
I
think-
just wanted to say I'm not advocating any
I
of the
think we should
issues.
strike that, in my opinion, because it's going to be difficult to support and defend. And why?
It could be a lightning rod. Just,
Pardon?
it could be a lightning rod, just to
Oh,
Be
no,
totally-
that could be.
Yeah, this
straightforward.
probably shouldn't be in the Articles of Incorporation. It's
The
more
charter.
like something for bylaws.
Was your charter, so,
Charter, yeah.
yeah. Okay, so the recommendation is to strike the last line in the,
I think so, yeah,
okay.
it was like thinking out loud.
Yeah.
Well, and it's easier to see it, that's why, it's like a target on a paper, so we can address the issues.
Yep.
I have a question before we move on,
Yes, sir?
and this has to do with composition of the board from the standpoint of who is eligible for membership from the various entities, and particularly the county. Would we entertain a provision that would restrict the BOCC appointments to members who reside in the unincorporated county as opposed to any of the incorporated areas?
Well, the member, it would be from, your membership is from, oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I don't know that you can do that, but I can,
You'd knock out 2 automatically because they're at large, so there's, they're countywide, so you would knock out 2 people
Which ones
automatically.
are at large?
Pardon me?
Which ones are at large?
District 6, I think, Josh is countywide.
No, I mean, okay, but he's in the county. He resides in the county. He
Okay,
doesn't reside in Temple Terrace or the city of Tampa.
okay.
Whereas what it would do is it would preclude anyone from any of the incorporated areas being nominated through the county commission.
I don't know how we could preclude that. I don't know how. we
Well, let me jump in on this. I was a county appointee, and I reside in the city of Tampa. And when it came time for me to be reappointed, the county commission decided that they only wanted someone from the unincorporated county to represent them in one of their in their appointed slots.
So that would be.
So, to me, I think we should not tell the county commission. I don't happen to agree with that policy, but it's their decision, not ours.
Yeah, to
So
your-
I think we should not tell them what to do, you know?
Well, to your point, David, I think what John's talking about is the elected officials, when you're talking about somebody who lives in Tampa, but their district,
No, I'm talking about the unelected representative.
or the unelected.
Like me.
Oh, the unelected.
It doesn't apply to the electeds. If the electeds happen to be in Temple Terrace or the city of Tampa, that's fine.
Right.
But the policy refers to the appointees, the non-elected appointees to the board.
Well, I misunderstood what John was saying. Okay.
Well, I get your point, David. I appreciate it. Thank you.
And I just don't think we ought to be telling the county who they can appoint.
Agreed.
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 It was just a thought.
The next, go ahead, Jim, I'm sorry.
Are we ready to move on
I
from
think
that?
we can move on.
So the next proposed changes are at the bottom of page 4. This also was a mention at the DOT report with regard to members appointing representatives that had substantive knowledge that would be beneficial to bring to the HART board. Wait a minute, is this the one? Encouraged when appointing a representative. Oh, this is more of an encouragement. This is, the first line is to, I apologize, is to, it's aspirational for people to, if they're a representative on the board, that they participate in order for each of the, not only the board, but the committees to achieve the required quorums. So, I mean, you can't make people sign that they will attend, although they're in the policies, there are, as far as attendance suggestions. So, but it had been brought up during conversations, and David and I were trying to address our list of items. So that's what the first sentence is.
Well, it's unfortunate that we would have to include something like that. However, I sit on several of the committees, and it is difficult to get quorums. And if we want the committee system to work, people got to be there, either virtual or in person. So I think we should leave it in.
The second sentence is what I had jumped to, which is also a consideration of qualifications of relevant subject matter expertise. That was a mention in the DOT report as far as the consideration of when the members were appointing representatives to consider the appointees having a subject matter expertise.
Well, what would qualify someone as being a subject matter expert?
That would be left to the member making the appointment. I mean, generally speaking, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind would be, would have a transportation background or an engineering background or a legal background or something that would be substantively related to the business of what HART does.
Well, let's look at our committee here. Mine's a financial background, okay? Yours, John, is a management background. David's a legal background. We bring something that's substantive to the board that help the board to grow and move forward.
Again, just an item on our list of issues that had been mentioned or included in the report, and so we included, it's something that can be struck, like I said, or expanded as we move forward in this document.
Yeah, I would be inclined, I agree with the Chairman Schisler, and I would be inclined to strike that one.
Okay.
Take it out.
No, I didn't say, I'm in favor of it.
You're in favor
Oh.
of that?
Absolutely,
But-
absolutely.
Okay,
We want people who want to promote the interests of HART, and they bring to the table technical expertise that can help set policy and enable staff and the administration to move it forward.
all right, but your background's in finance, mine's
Right.
in economics, and the newest representative is a former Coast Guard representative.
Okay,
Okay,
He's the lawyer.
we all have a qualification, but we're not necessarily an engineer or a transportation subject matter expert. This would predispose the board to picking subject matter experts and excluding people like you and me and, you know, a number of other people that are currently on the board.
Well, actually, if I could interject, so, you know, just to expose the slick legal mind, the language says the member shall also consider. So you're just, you know, if you're a member, if you're the county, you're considering the qualifications of relevant, also left to, you know, the decisions of there's no requirement. It says that you shall consider. That's the requirement. If the member governing board or whomever is making the appointments, they look at that and say, you know, but this is the pool of our applicants, this is what we think, we've considered it, but we can't find somebody that's relevant, we considered it.
To me, that's too nebulous and too ambiguous.
Well, and that's why I drafted it that way, because I didn't want something that was regulatory in nature, but something that addressed the issue.
I think it's a slippery slope in that direction.
And so I will be glad to revise it based on direction.
I guess the thing we have to look at, the total population of people who have experience in transit,
Isn't
just
that large?
strictly transit,
Yeah.
is going to be so small in this area that, you know, we probably already have them on staff to a large degree. So it's, you know, we got somebody who's, you know, retired CEO from Poughkeepsie or whatever, you know, they have some experience that they can offer, great, apply, but I don't think we ever get them.
Well, and
I'd be surprised.
and I'm sorry for interrupting,
No,
and the
you're not.
board sets policy. So to your point, you have the subject matter experts, and I know I sound like I'm advocating one way or the other, but from any agency that I've worked with, your board sets policy.
Right.
And so, you know, it might be an encouragement, it might be, you know, a reminder that in setting that policy, if they bring something to the table, but everybody brings something to the table, financial, legal, management, what have you. It's just a line that I wanted to address.
Yeah, I'm not sure this belongs in the charter, though.
If I can just interject, I think this came from some of the previous board discussion of certain board members' interest in having this type of thing. So, and it could be as simple as, have you ever rode a bus in Hillsborough County? Or have you worked on transportation issues at all in your career? Are you a good financial? Have you worked in government? Like, there's a wide variety. You don't have to be technically a subject matter expert.
Bureaucrats being bureaucrats, they can take it to the other extreme just as easily.
Well, and that's why I kept it as nebulous as I did, in order for it to,
I
For
question whether it ought to be in this document at all.
okay.
Just out of curiosity, this was one of the FDOT comments.
Yes.
It was mentioned in the study, yes.
Perhaps we leave it in there, let the board pull it. Okay? Again, this is still good, no matter what happens, going forward, it's gonna be a fluid document. But I'd rather let the board pull it than this, to not present it to them, because we
Yeah,
need
I
to
agree.
check our boxes.
I agree.
Okay, okay.
Okay,
Go ahead,
so
Jan.
that finishes through page 5. We go to page 6 at the bottom. This was committees of the Board of Directors, and this was also discussion, sorry, I should have my checklist in front of me from the report. I don't believe that this was an FDOT mentioned. It was a, how do I want to say it? It was a reference to trying to encourage and shore up committee commitments and memberships as far as participation in the committees. That all members would participate in the committees and thereby increasing the chances of having a quorum at each meeting.
The only sentence that does that is each director shall serve at least one term on a standing committee,
Yes, it was couched.
very definitely.
I'm going to be transparent. As I drafted this, I've done a lot of drafting before, so sometimes your focus needs to have a little more context and couching before you get there. But we can be straightforward and take the rest of it out and just have the statement.
Well, we have, what is it, the 80-20 rule, 20% of people do 80% of the heavy lifting on it. And I think this is a classic, our board is a classic example of that. You had a very small nucleus of people who do most of the committee work and so forth. So I don't have a problem with putting that in there, just that sentence. I'm not sure where to put it.
And that's why I created the section.
David, what's your thoughts?
Well, I'm looking at the language now. Where is the sentence we're talking about? I'm not finding it.
Next to the last sentence in the blue area.
So-
Each director shall serve at least one term on a standing committee.
I'm sorry, I guess I'm not following. I thought we were talking about whether a member has to have some kind of expertise.
We're on page 6 now. We're on page 6. Sorry, David. Article 5.
Okay, I'm looking at that language, and all it's saying is you have to serve on one standing committee?
Essentially.
Is that what we're debating?
Yes. You think that's necessary?
I don't know. I mean, there's nothing, I don't see anything wrong with it, you know?
Well, that's the meat of the whole issue is, you know, the board can create committees, ad hoc, standing, whatever, but that and shall have no less than 3 members with alternatives, but that each director shall serve at least one term on a standing committee. And I think that's the effort that's trying to be accomplished with that whole paragraph, is to say, you know, y'all got to play in the sandbox too,
So no gold bricking allowed.
basically.
Well, and then they also creates the basis on which the board chair can refer because he appoints to the committees, or she. So we look to the charter to say everybody's got to
Right.
participate on at least one committee. We don't have that right now.
Well, I'm in favor of encouraging greater participation.
I like it. I like it.
Fine to me.
Good.
Okay,
Joe,
check.
good deal.
Moving on. Okay, so the next proposed revisions, the title of the section is on the bottom of page 8, Special Regional Taxation. And this is moving the $0.5 mil to $1 mil.
Okay, that's the biggest lightning rod of the whole package.
Yeah, yes, it is. And it's also the only thing in the package that the county has the ability, I call it first right of refusal. They can vote to kill this. The rest of it, all of the rest of the changes that are in the charter, that is not something that the county can have the ability to veto. Those are, all of those other revisions, or any of the ones that are coming up, fall under the majority, the majority vote of the board. But then everything has to be ratified by the members, but the county has the veto on the millage, and that is the only thing that has to go to referendum.
Do they have the veto authority at the base level, or does it have to be at the referendum level? Ergo, like what happened with the school tax?
At the base level. So if they And also, I mean, to the extent every member has veto, they have to ratify the proposed revisions that the board sends out to their member governing boards.
This would be before it goes on the referendum.
Yes, sir.
Debate this one all day long.
Yeah, this is simply the language that you need to have the debate at the board, actually.
Yeah, this could be the biggest lightning rod.
Yeah, that's the part that's going to, deciding on what the actual millage increase is.
And we based the, it seems like a long time ago, but we had the conversations on what was potentially necessary for the agency moving forward, and I believe that there was some discussions in the meetings on the 1 mil would support what was proposed in I don't know what the planning horizon would be, but in a sufficient number of years planning horizon.
Well, by approving an increase in the millage from half mil up to 1 mil, doesn't necessarily follow that the budget is necessarily going to go up from whatever it is now to double that, or to whatever amount that would absorb that 1 mil.
Could we encumber it by restricting usage over and above the half, like, say, a mill with 50% of it having to go to, no more than 50% for operations and the other 50% for capital? Could we do that legitimately?
No, why not?
I would have
I
to,
mean, that would preclude, I mean, that would ensure growth of the structure of HART in itself. And that's what we're trying to accomplish. We could live with, I believe, how much, I'm getting tongue-tied here. We devote part of our operating money to capital now, the operating budget, towards capital expenditures. And if we were to limit to just 50% capital, 50%, or anything over half mil going to capital in future budgets or future ad valorem valuations, that would allow us to get to pre-COVID levels and ultimately someday pre-mission max levels if possible, and put us where we would need to be, because with the capital portion, we could leverage that against the feds and FDOT. And Justin hasn't thrown anything at me yet, so I don't think I'm too far.
So, yeah, so Mr. Willis, so the 50/50, I don't know about the 50/50, but definitely I think staff could put some figures together to figure out what the capital need would be going forward, years out, and what that percentage would look like. If we were gonna do that, kind of split the ad valorem that way.
Yeah, I think that.
Provides a formula for that.
If we could catch it, because I don't want any, and I know I would say, well, wait a minute, wait. We get all this pot of money, and then the unions are gonna want a bigger chunk, and, it becomes a union negotiation issue, and now Justin's getting twitchy, but.
I would hesitate to put a number on that, because you want to handle that on an annual budgeting basis, right? So the first few years of any increase would be largely investing in capital to ramp up the services later. But eventually, you're going to reach a point where you want to balance that
Be a tipping point.
right. But I would also say, given the legal history of various taxes in the area, tying the hands of future boards based on language in a ballot initiative, as I'm not a lawyer, but I would probably think that you would want to stay away from tying the hands of future boards and commissions in regards to how the money could be allocated. I'll punt that to legal, and I won't speak to that again. But on an annual basis, right, like what we do for the transit development plan, like we can, that's what we do, right? We're going to find the point at which we wouldn't want to invest any more in capital for fear of not having the operating dollars to put the service on the table. That probably, whether it was a quarter mil or a half mil, that wouldn't be reached for a number of years. But you wouldn't want to necessarily out the gate say that all this new revenue is just for capital, because you'd kind of limit yourself on the ability to deliver the service down the road once your capital house is in order, for lack of a better way to say that.
I'm just trying to figure out a way to make it
But I
palatable.
think we could make that board policy instead of actually dictating that in the charter, the percentage of how the ad
That's
valorem
fair,
goes.
that's fair.
Well, and, I'm sorry. And
This is mechanic. I think it's a mistake to tie our hands that way. I mean, there's a reason why I think Justin just said this. I don't want to repeat the whole thing, but why tie your hands? There could be unique circumstances in any given year
Yeah,
that would dictate a shift one way or the other. Why do that? I
Point
mean,
taken.
there's just no reason.
point taken. I was just trying to figure out a way to make it sellable. Okay, I'm good with that.
or could I just clarify what you were suggesting, Mr. Schisler, was to make it sellable would be in the referendum language, which I would have a little bit of concern, more than a little bit of concern, as to, that was my question. Were you thinking of putting that type of restriction in the ballot language for the referendum, or just saying that that's the way the organization would be implementing
At this
it?
point, neither.
Okay,
But I agree, pull that completely. It's just gonna, I don't want to tie future boards' hands together like that.
And I just wanted to add, on the operating side, it works the same way for attracting the federal dollars. The more service we put out, the more we're going to get back from the feds because they evaluate us on ridership, miles
Right.
operated, and that sort of thing. So it's a similar dynamic. The more money we spend on operations, the more we can attract on the federal side. It's a little clearer on the capital side because those are matches of 20% and that sort of thing.
Right.
But it's a similar dynamic because if we put more on the street, we'd get more of the formula from our region.
Okay.
So just to kind of.
Okay, all right, point taken. Okay, I'm good.
okay, so really at this point, then, that's page 9, and I think what I'm hearing is that the direction is to just leave it at the proposed 1 mil for discussion purposes.
Correct.
And then, because the statute just changes to what type of a ballot it has to be on, that's why you have the language defining it. I reduced it, I went a little overboard. David suggested that we just leave it, but I wanted to make sure that our charter reflected what the statutory change was, the type of ballot it needed to be on. So as the statute just changes, the charter would change as amended.
Okay.
And I believe at that point, now, there would be a need to reflect the changes in the appendixes. I didn't go there. I thought we needed to focus on what the language is first before it would be reflected in the appendices for membership. I think somebody pointed that out, Mr. King. So that's the end of the proposed revisions.
I have a question.
Yes, yes, sir.
And this would be to something that does not appear to have been considered in the past and not considered in this revision as well. But we have, HART has a body of policies that exist, that are amended from time to time, I suppose. But what I don't see reflected in here is anything that would constitute a body of bylaws. Does not establish the creation of a set of bylaws. Is that something we might want to consider including?
I don't know. We
I mean-
we really do have extensive policies that
Right.
the agency works from. The policies will also have to be, well, the board had already provided direction that the policies need to be revised, both to reflect some of the things that we've done and also to bring them up to date. So the policies could also be revised with regard to anything that we're doing in the charter.
Well, the reason I ask this is, to my mind at least, a charter or articles, which these are, they establish the organization. They are the overarching governing documents of this organization
That would be your,
in broad terms. bylaws would exist in order to establish a basis for conducting the day-to-day operations of the board, or the ongoing operations of the board. And it may be just a matter of codifying the policies as bylaws. These are the rules that we operate by. So they're not fungible or too elastic.
That was actually in my mind, so that any policy that we wanted to update or revise
Yeah.
or expand would also require the
Board
revision
approval.
to the,
Just board approval, but not county approval.
well, policies go to the board approval anyway. There's
Yeah.
a process. The board has to provide the direction that the policies be considered for revision, whether it's specific or a general.
But they've not been codified as a matter of bylaws, which to me has more substance and structure to it.
But then the board takes action on the revision. So it goes to whomever is doing the revising. For instance, I'm doing some revising for policies now, then it would go to a committee to also review them and recommendations, and it goes back for final action to the board. So you do have a process already.
Okay.
With regard to board action. You would just be adding another layer by creating the bylaws and then having to have the bylaws revised if you're revising the policies. I understand
Yeah.
the organizational structure that have worked with previously, but I think that the way that HART is set right now is actually working pretty well. And it does give you the flexibility, and the board has two actions that it has to take to revise the policies.
I think, John, what you're doing, you're looking at this as almost like an Articles of Incorporation, okay?
In a way, yes.
Which sets out specifically in the articles that you'll have and we're two dime store attorneys here, we got the two legal beagles here, a set of bylaws.
Right.
Okay, which actually, the nuts and bolts. But we as a board have a set of that's not this. This just says, okay, the board exists,
Right.
poof.
Exactly.
And that we as a board have developed our own policies through the years, and they're reviewed, sometimes on an annual basis, not reviewed, but they're changed and modified as necessary. And I believe that the general counsel is reviewing them each and every one at this point, or
I actually, yes, I've started to go through the entire
Okay.
body of policies. We did the one on the legal
yeah.
back.
I guess my point is, I'm not so sure we need to address that in the
Okay.
charter.
Well, that's what I was asking, is whether or not we needed to.
Yeah, I don't think we do,
Okay.
because it's never operated under that perspective. David, do you think what's your thoughts?
I'm fine.
Okay.
I don't think we need to do that.
Okay. Well, I've asked the question, that was my goal.
Okay.
So, just to reiterate, the only thing that I have in my notes to change is to try to, we're striking a line in section 1 under on the number of directors. Maybe to clarify it, we're leaving at the bottom of page 4 and the top of page 5, we're leaving that language in there for discussion purposes. We're also leaving at the bottom of page 6, the new section on committee of the board of directors. We're leaving that in for discussion purposes. And we're leaving the proposed change under the ad valorem to 1 mil for also discussion purposes. Would it be the direction of the committee for me to do one more version for the committee's consideration before it goes to the board?
We'll have to, because that one section is pretty massive to change.
Okay.
Which line exactly are we striking?
Oh, let me go back. Each member shall appoint no more than X number of elected public officials as a director.
Limited number of politicians on the board. The last line in that.
Oh, the last line?
Yeah, the last line.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, we meet, the board meeting's February 3rd, right? We were hoping to bring this, does it really matter, February or March? Okay, gives you time, so you don't have to do this tonight. Can you rework this, get it back to us, and then we can have a quick meeting next month at the committee meetings, and then be prepared for the March, whatever date it is,
Okay,
board meeting?
yeah, we can do that with regard to having
Is that
another
a-
committee meeting in March, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
okay. David, are you okay with that process?
Yes, yes.
Okay, give us a chance of one more step. Just one more, at the risk of beating this horse to death. Do we need to change do we need any statutory changes in order to modify,
The population?
board size?
No.
We're good?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So in essence, we're not we're not setting an arbitrary number. It's going to be based upon the calculation of the populations.
Correct.
And that drags it automatically. Okay. All right.
So with regard to the committee, so we're up to old business, new business.
Right.
Matter.
Okay, any old business? Any new business? I think we set what we're going to do going forward. Appearing to be none, thank you, everybody. Janice, I know this is a Herculean task. Thank you to you and David. Hopefully we get somewhere with it, but we shall see. Anyway, this meeting is adjourned. Have a nice trip. What are you leaving now? You might be there.
Thank you.
Thank you.